Hello everyone, welcome to lucky number 13 video. And while I am choosing to embrace the lucky number 13, I am not shooting this on Friday, I'm shooting this on a Saturday of course, so just to be sure. But this video is going to be a little bit different than some of the other ones that I've done recently. It's not going to be so tech focused perhaps, or so focused on the features of the camera, the type of the camera, any of that kind of fun stuff. This one is just about one of my favorite topics and I'm kind of super excited about. It is nighttime photography, cityscape photography, one of my favorite things to do in the world, photography wise. Okay, so to quote Philip DeFranco, let's just jump into it. I'm going to pull out my handy dandy bullet journal here, which I never use but decided to use because it's a video. So number 5 for me is distance to your light source. So that's the kind of it's kind of intermixed with the next one as well, but what I mean by that is how close are you to whatever you're carrying to take a photo with. How close are you to the light source? So if you're shooting buildings or you're shooting along the street, how close is the light that's coming into your camera, to the sensor, to you, basically, right? So that will impact the type of technology that you can use. And so this time I'm not going to focus just on photography, not just on cameras, not mirrorless or DSLR, that kind of fun stuff, not even on the lenses or any of that kind of thing, but basically what type of tool you can use to capture a really cool skyline nighttime type of shot, right? So if you're close to your subject, then there's a lot of things that you have available to you to use, right? So if this is all you have, and I don't mean just the Samsung Note 9, I mean a cell phone camera. This is a great tool if you're pretty close to the light source, right? So this little thing has a little baby sensor, if you will, so it's not going to be great for shots where your skyline's way off in the distance, right? So you're just not going to get a lot of detail in that image if you're using this guy for something that's way off in the distance. Okay, that's a good segue into number 4, which according to my bullet journal here is gear, basically. So as we're talking about gear, your options are obviously cell phone or DSLR or mirrorless camera, which I'm shooting this on right now with the, I'm going to say Z6 because I think that Z sounds pretty cool, but I can't get around the Nikon. I guess still got to go with Nikon. But if you're going to shoot images that where your buildings are way off in the distance, right? Your skyline's way off in the distance, your light source is way off, then you're going to need a tripod to put said type of technology on. So this guy right here is, I'm not going to suggest this, I'll put it down in the links in the description if anybody cares what this is. This guy is phenomenal. This is a bulletproof tripod, one of the best I've ever had. It's an Enduro carbon CT213, not that matters, and I got the Series U ball head to put on top of this thing. So the equipment, the tripod itself is not really that important, but I mean, as far as the manufacturer, what you want to do though is make sure that you get something super solid, right? Because you're going to be taking a pretty long exposure, if you will. If you're using a camera, you're normally going to be in the seconds range where your shutter is open. So you're shooting 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15, 20, sometimes maybe even longer, depending upon the distance to your light source. So you really want to get a solid tripod, something that's not going to move, that the breeze is not going to catch it and blow it over. You probably want to, if you can, sandbag it, if you have that option. So this thing's got the option here to hook a sandbag on it, if you will. So this thing is super solid, super amazing. So like I said, I'll put the links in the description. Not sponsored, not going to get paid. So, you know, if you choose to buy this thing, go for it. If you know, whatever tripod that you like, hey, put it down in the comments. If you have a tripod that you think is fantastic, then great, that's awesome. Basically, you just need something super solid that can handle the weight of your camera, whatever type of camera you happen to have. Or like I said, if you're shooting with a phone, you can get a little tiny tripod, and they've got little holders that you can use for that. And so that works as well if your light source, like I said, is close. So one thing I do not recommend is shooting on these things. I know all the YouTubers are all big into these Joby things, the Gorilla Pods. This thing broke on me after about 5 uses. So I might do a separate video on tripod reviews if anybody really wants to hear something like that. But from my perspective, don't use this thing. This thing is garbage, in my opinion. So lots of options out there for tripods. So like I said, I can do a separate video on tripods reviews or whatever. So that's gear. So really, you just need a tripod, you need a camera, you need a decent lens that can gather the light, right? So something that's probably wide angle. You're going to want something somewhere in the range of a 24, 16 to that range if you can get it. You know, and most of the time you're shooting at a pretty shallow depth of field, or a wide depth of field, I should say, so a small aperture. So my preferred range is somewhere around f8 to f11 if you're shooting on a camera. Obviously you don't have that option if you're shooting on a cell phone. So sometimes I'll shoot at f13 if it's earlier in the evening, so if I want to blur the water, I'll do something like that, so I can shoot with a little bit longer exposure, longer shutter speed essentially, right? So, so that leads me to number 3. Lucky 13, lucky 3, whatever, you know, lots of 3s. Allowing yourself to look stupid. Now I put this hat on. Or I say look stupid, look crazy, whatever you want to call it. I put this goofy hat on because I wanted you to see kind of how you're perceived out there in the world when you're shooting at night, especially in cityscapes. This has happened to me a number of times where I'm happen to be shooting in environments where a lot of people are pouring out of bars at night, maybe a little tipsy. And you're sitting there with your tripod, trying to shoot a cityscape, trying to get a shot where people are going in and out, and maybe they're yelling, they want to see what you're doing with your camera. This happens all the time. For me, I've even been kicked out of certain areas, not because I was trespassing by any stretch of the imagination, but especially back in the States, they tend to be a little particular about me shooting on private property. So this happened to me in Las Vegas, where I got kicked off of a sidewalk where I was shooting because I didn't even have my tripod on the ledge away from the traffic, and they still kicked me out because it was private property. So something to keep in mind if you really want to get a fantastic evening shot. Sometimes you gotta take those positions to get that shot in areas where there's a lot of traffic, a lot of people, and they're gonna look at you weird. They're gonna look at you strange. So if you're one of those people who have difficulties being out there, maybe embarrassing yourself a little bit, which I'm not great at from a video perspective, but I'm much better from a photography perspective. So if I'm out there shooting with a tripod and a camera, I have no problems doing that. But this even happened to me just the other day when I was shooting in Granville Island here. People just kept stopping by. They would get in your shot. I even had people ask me if I would take their picture while I'm shooting the video. So funny how people operate, I guess. But anyway, just be willing to put yourself out there, to put yourself in positions that are somewhat embarrassing sometimes. You know, you're that weird guy and photographer shooting, like I was shooting on a Friday night one night, and like I said, people pouring out of bars and stuff, so it happens. So if you want to get the image, you got to be willing to put yourself out there, make yourself look a little strange. So that leads me to number 2. Pick a clear night with low humidity that's not hazy or super overcast or with a lot of water vapor in the air. This one's pretty critical. If you want to get a clear image, especially if you're shooting buildings that are off in the distance, the last thing you want to try to do is shoot on an overcast day when there's a lot of moisture in the air, because you're going to get a lot of haziness. No matter whether you think you can see it or not, the buildings themselves, you're going to do a lot of post-processing for those who are inclined to use a post-processing type of software like Lightroom or Photoshop or Capture One. You're just going to spend a lot of time trying to dehaze, trying to clear up that image because the atmosphere was not clear, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, that if you want to get the clearest shot possible, you're shooting on a tripod, you want to make sure that you shoot on a clear night, okay? And that leads me to number 1. That is composition. So this one is huge. This is probably the only area where I've got a little bit of background video to kind of show what I mean by that. But the most critical aspect, I think, of a really solid cityscape type of image is to both include a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And what I mean by that is you need a visual element in the image that makes it more appealing, right? So I see the biggest mistake I see people make when they're trying to shoot nightscape type of images, cityscape images, is they just shoot the buildings, right? There's nothing in the middle ground. And when I say middle ground, when you're looking at the image, it's just kind of in between the area where you're looking and the background, meaning the buildings, right? So there's nothing there. Maybe it's a street or something like that, but there's nothing to really grab your attention, right? In the middle ground. And then there's nothing in the foreground. There's no leading lines, there's no railing, no wooden walkway or whatever it happened to be, something to really draw your attention to different elements of the image. And to me, those are the most solid images. Now, this is a rule that is true in all of landscape photography, really. You see some of the really good landscape photographers out there really focused on it. A couple of guys that I really like, by the way, that do an excellent job of landscape photography. I'm going to put their descriptions in the video down below, or put a link to their YouTube channels in the description. One of them is Adrian Alford. He is fantastic, and I will put his link in the description as well. If you really like to see some super cool landscape type of images, he's super good. And another guy named Matt Irwin, I think he's also in Australia. Well, I know he's also in Australia. And he does some really good cityscape type of imagery as well, a lot of landscape type stuff, super good. And he's also really good with nighttime photography as well. So I am going to show some of these images that I really focused on that type of, and you see it even in the thumbnail to this video, where composition, foreground element, middle ground element, background element were really paramount to the image, in my opinion. Now you can compare those to some of the other cityscape images. Maybe you don't care about those types of things, but in my opinion, the most solid imagery is really that shows foreground, middle ground, background, nice depth of field where everything is pretty clear all the way throughout, which means that you're going to shoot, for those who are photographers that have cameras, you're going to have to shoot with a relatively small aperture, which creates issues as far as the amount of light that you're letting into the camera, right? So f8 to f11 is probably somewhere around the range where I shoot most of mine. And for low grain, I'm normally shooting at my base level ISO. So on my Nikon, that's around ISO 64. For others, it may be around 100, but you want to shoot somewhere around your base level ISO to lower or limit the amount of grain that's in your images as well, which is the noise, those little granules that you see at night that are especially apparent, especially if you're using a cell phone to shoot your images. So that's all I have. That's super easy. Hopefully this video is not, 15-20 minutes long or something like that, because I've got a bunch of photos that I'm going to include as well. One of the main things that you might want to focus on when you're doing any kind of photography, landscape photography, but especially skyline photography, is to kind of have a mid-ground, which is kind of the water here, the reflective water that I'm using. And then kind of the background, of course, you want something that is unique to capture the focus or the interest of the image. And then you want some kind of foreground section here. And I don't know if you can see it in the video, but I've got rocks here in the foreground that I'm shooting kind of through. And I'm going to try to capture all of those in a single image and kind of pull it all together in post, and we'll go from there. So that's it. I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Please click like and subscribe. Apparently it makes a big deal, the YouTube algorithm. I don't know, maybe this will do a little bit better than some of the other ones that I've put out there recently that just sank. That one with putting together a creative list, no one seems to want to look at. So yeah, if you have a request, by the way, please let me know in the comments. If there's something that you would really like for me to focus on or maybe expand on in some of these videos that I've talked about before, then please put a comment. Comments are a big deal. I love comments. Even if you're ripping on me for my lighting, which somebody did in my first video, so that's fine too. Just shoot me a comment and let me know what you think. So, all right, everybody, have a great day. Talk to you soon.